Hi. Let's talk about Johnny Tsunami.
Musical styles are still a very important form of communication for our young people.
Johnny Tsunami was a Disney live-action film that came out in 1999, written by the tag team of Douglas Sloan and Ann Austin, who prior to this were co-producers on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Zeo, and Turbo. After this, they continued their power run with Ninja Storm and Dino Thunder. Taking the helm for his second director credit is Stephen Boyan. His first film was Meet the Deedles, coincidentally another movie about surfers. Better still, one of the main actors in that film, Steve Van Wormer, was recast in this film as the snowboard and ski shop owner twins Randy and Ronnie. Additionally, Boyan would go on to direct Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire, which, even knowing how bonkers it is still one of my favorite Disney movies. The main cast consists of Brandon Baker, who prior to this was in the Jungle Book live-action movie and Punks, Mary Page Keller, who has a 30-plus year career in TV, movies, and shows, most recently with a part in Pretty Little Liars and Chasing Life, Yuji Okamoto, who was in American Yakuza and Robot Wars before this, as well as the Paper Tigers and the Cobra Kai series after this, Kirsten Storms, who only months prior to this starred in Xenon Girl of the 21st Century, another bonkers Disney movie I happen to love to death, and would go on to have a long voice acting career in Kim Possible, as well as a long-standing run in General Hospital, Lee Thompson Young of famous Jet Jackson and Smallville fame, and lastly, but certainly not least, the actual Johnny Tsunami, Cary-Hiroyuki Tagawa. He's been in an insane amount of projects, but most will know him from Mortal Kombat, 47 Ronin, Lost in Space, as well as lending his voice to the Overwatch animated short Dragons. Now, before we get into the more serious side of the movie, there are a lot of fun tidbits that I want to get out of the way first. The ClassNet project Johnny's dad is working on was a real thing, designed to do exactly what he said it did. It even lines up because ClassNet was just becoming a thing in 1996, a few years before this movie came out. This is one of the few films in the late 90s that did have hand-drawn storyboards for a live-action movie to ensure they were planning the right shots for the snowboarding tricks. Before Johnny leaves for Vermont, he has a conversation with his grandpa on the beach.
You know, when you were born, your mom and pop named you Johnny, but I named you Pono. You know why?
Because it means goodness?
Exactly. And no matter what, you always seem to find the good in everything. Remember a couple of days ago, on the TV they said storm was gonna come ashore?
Yeah, I thought it was gonna blow out the championships.
Look what happened. The storm stalled and probably sent you the killer wave you rode for the win.
It's actually a perfect description of what Johnny is currently going through. He thinks that this coming storm is going to be really bad and will get in the way of what he wants and loves, but he quickly sees it's not as bad as he thinks. He makes some new friends, he learns and enjoys snowboarding, and by using everything he's gone through, he hops right on the
Killer wave you rode for the win.
The only reason Emily came over to Johnny's side is because he called her out on her white privilege.
You were born to sky, so you might as well stick to skiing. Besides, you wouldn't want Brett to get mad, would you?
And if I'm honest, I do think she got a fair bit of comeuppance when she went over the edge. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I wanted her to get hurt or anything, but it was a little fair. And probably the wildest fact of this entire story, Johnny and Sam somehow managed to sneak onto a military base in Vermont, board a military cargo plane, remain hidden the entire trip, and somehow sneak off of the base in Hawaii without anyone noticing.
I still think my dad is gonna have me court-martialed once he finds out we snuck onto one of their planes.
Okay, so now that that's out the way, we can actually talk about the movie. The film does spend a decent amount of time showing us how Johnny is coping with having to move to a new place, but the core issue of the film is the family drama triangle of Johnny, his dad, and his grandfather. Now, starting with Pete, when you first watch him, he strongly comes across as just a boring, uptight dad who needs to learn how to let loose. However, if you really take the time to think about some of the things he says, it paints a much larger picture of why Pete feels so negatively towards his dad, as well as the influence he has on Johnny. One of the first things he says in the movie is,
if someday, when you decided to have a family, you'd have a job that would allow you to support them and be there for them when they needed you.
That, coupled with him then telling his wife,
Pete, your dad is a good man. He would never do anything to hurt Johnny.
He would never mean to.
Already gives us enough info to know that Pete did not have a good childhood, and that he blames that on his dad choosing to spend his days surfing rather than providing enough for his family. So imagine having to live with that sort of resentment most of your life, finally having a son of your own, but then your son only wanting to spend time with your dad, and then of course you're going to have the fear that he's going to end up just like him. Even if he is ultimately partially wrong about how he's raising Johnny in this moment, it makes total sense why Pete wants Johnny to focus on getting his life on the right track. He even says part of the reason for the move was to try and get closer to Johnny.
I really hope that coming here, taking away some of the distractions, would bring us together.
So all in all, rewatches make it clear that he's actually a really good dad. He just has to take a step back and lighten up from time to time. Johnny Sr., on the other hand, takes an almost entirely hands-off approach in raising Johnny. Now, that isn't to say he doesn't impart some solid wisdom for his grandson.
Don't get me wrong, Pono.
I'm proud that you want to bring big wave glory to the family name, but I want you to find your own greatness. Guarantee, when you do, it'll be far better than anything I ever did.
But he's clearly shown to be a laid-back, go-with-the-flow kind of person. And on the surface, that's not a bad thing. But as we've seen with Pete, he clearly took that to an extreme and allowed it to affect him and his son's life. Both of them obviously love Johnny and want what's best for them, but their personalities and their history leads them to try and tackle it two different ways. Pete wants to control Johnny, and Johnny Sr. wants him to be as free-flowing as he is. When the two finally cut through all the bullshit and simply talk to each other, they rapidly find closure and understand each other. First, it's with Johnny Sr. finally acknowledging his shortcomings.
If I could go back, there's a lot of things I would have done to been a better father to you.
Then, he finally opens Pete's eyes to the situation at hand. And finally, tells Pete something that, based on his choked up reaction, Pete has been waiting to hear for a long time.
What's done is done between us. But I'm proud of your son. And so will you be proud of Johnny when the time comes?
Once they have their talk, Pete is finally seen fully smiling and having a good time. He even throws a celebratory barbecue party at his house when Johnny wins the race at the end. He even goes a step further and tells Johnny that if he wants, he can go back to Hawaii and finish the school year there. Johnny shoots it down, realizing that he has a good thing going where he is, but it does show just how much of that weight that talk took off of his shoulders. Now, I don't want to be too negative because all in all, I really do love this film. It has some great music, good character development, and the cinematography is about as tight as you'd want it for a late 90s TV movie. However, upon the rewatch, I did realize something that actually really bothers me when I do think about it. And that, my dear friends, is the question of,
Hey, ladies!
as much character depth and growth as we get from a lot of the cast, the female roles are absolutely shortchanged, and it upsets me. So let's quickly go through the list and you'll see what I mean. Johnny's mom, Melanie, has the most development hands down. And that's a little sad if we really want to talk and think about it. While yes, she does do her best to be on Johnny's side and to play a devil's advocate for Pete, ultimately she doesn't have a large place. She tries to talk to Johnny, but he still feels alone and misunderstood, and as much as she tries to talk to Pete, she seems to have very little sway with him. So often, she's just left sort of standing there looking concerned and gorgeous. We're not even going to bother talking about Emily, besides stating the obvious fact that she's a cookie-cutter prep girl with no real growth past wanting to go against her strict father just for the sake of doing so. We briefly get a mention of Sam's mom, in that we see a picture of her and hear that she died and then is never brought up again. And most strange of all, despite how huge the family beef is that's been going on, there isn't a single mention of Johnny's grandma. Not from Pete, not from Johnny Sr., not from Johnny, or no one. Nothing. I'm not crazy, right? Like, it's not just me, right? I don't know. But overall, I do still enjoy and recommend this movie. Flawed as it may be at times, it does have a lot to say about family relationships and about the anxiety of taking on new challenges. But I'm curious, what do you think?
Musical styles are still a very important form of communication for our young